back with today's read aloud. We're going to cover about 3 chapters worth of reading, and things are starting to ramp up a little bit in our book. So chapter 41 is called An Odd Report. "Excuse me, sir." The secretary stood nervously in the doorway of Chief Superintendent Blake's Scotland Yard office. "What is it?" snapped Blake. He was signing the last of the day's correspondence and planned to be on his way to dinner in 5 minutes. He did not appreciate anything interfering with his dinner. "It's Superintendent Schroeder, sir," said the secretary. "He says it's of the utmost importance." "It had better be," said Blake. "Send him in." The secretary scurried away, and a stocky, sweating man entered holding a piece of paper. "Oh, sorry to interrupt, sir, but a matter has come up which I believe is of the utmost—" Yes, the utmost importance," said Blake, drumming his fingers on the desk. "What is it?" "Sir, you may recall that you gave special orders that you wanted to be advised immediately if any officers reported any unusual activity involving children meeting certain descriptions." Blake's fingers stopped drumming. "Go on," he said. "Well," said Schroeder, holding out the piece of paper, "a short while ago, 2 officers turned in an odd report from Royal Victoria Dock. I would go so far as to say it's quite unbelievable, sir. However, since the children are involved—" "Let me see it," said Blake, and he snatched the report from Schroeder's hands. He read it quickly, rubbed a hand through his hair, and read it again. Then he handed it back to Schroeder. "You're to take this report to Buckingham Palace immediately." The palace? But immediately. You're to hand it personally to Baron von Schatten's assistant, Simon Ravel, and no one else. You then await instructions. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Go." Schroeder scurried out the door, and Blake sat still for a few seconds, then pounded his fist on his desk, thinking about the dinner that he would not be eating anytime soon. Chapter 42 is called Someplace Safe. "I think we're getting near my house," said Wendy. "You think?" said Peter, a bit testily through chattering teeth. "I'm sorry," said Wendy, also a bit testy. "I'm doing the best I can." "Not very good," said Tinkerbell from inside Peter's shirt. "Oh, be quiet," said Peter. "What?" said Wendy. "I wasn't talking to you," said Peter. "I should hope not," said Wendy. "I was talking to her," said Tink. And after a few more steps, Wendy said, "Listen, if you don't like walking with me, you can fly." "Great idea," said Tink. But Peter shook his head. He didn't like walking, but he couldn't leave Wendy alone. The truth was, he wasn't enthusiastic about being on his own in London at night either. He had had more than his share of bad experiences in the past confusing city. And just as a bit of a time out there, if you remember from Shadow Thieves, some of Peter's misadventures in the city, we all have our kind of favorite moments from Peter's first trip into London. They slogged on in silence. Their physical condition was as miserable as their mood. They'd been walking for hours, Peter in short pants and short sleeves, Wendy on one bare foot through the fog and chill of the London night, made all the chillier by the fact that they were soaking wet. They'd taken a zigzag route through a maze of streets to avoid people as much as possible, and hiding whenever they saw or thought they saw a bobby. They were hungry, tired, and cold, and at the moment, lost. They rounded a corner, and ahead was a busy, well-lit street. As they drew closer, Wendy said, "I think that's Old Brompton Road." "Is that good?" said Peter. "Oh, yes, we're near my house." "It's about time," said Tinkerbell. And they reached Old Brompton Road and turned left. In a few blocks, they turned left again and walked halfway down a residential street. Wendy stopped and said, "I don't understand." "What?" said Peter. "This is my house, but there are no lights on. It's late. Maybe maybe your father is asleep." "Even if he were, there would be lights on front and back." Wendy climbed the front steps and tried the doorknob, then rang the bell. No answer. "Where could he be?" said Wendy, her voice quavering. She'd been counting on seeing her father again and being held in his strong arms, letting him take the burden of the many decisions she had off of her. And now? She put her face into her hands. "She's gonna cry," said Tinkerbell, not sympathetically, but accurately. Wendy stifled a sob, a tear, then another leaked through her fingers and spattered onto the porch. Peter wanted to put his arm around her, but couldn't quite get up the nerve. So he patted her twice in the back and said, There. It felt like a stupid thing to say, but it was all he could think of at the moment. After an awkward moment, Wendy raised her head and sniffed and regained her composure. All right, she said. We'll go to Grandfather's house. More walking? Chimed Tink. Is it far? Said Peter. It's less than a mile, I should think. If you could think, said Tink. What did she say? She said we better go, it's cold. They walked back up the street and continued crossing Kensington Road and entering Hyde Park. This led the way, sticking to the footpath, and there were a few lampposts. Most of the time they could only see a few feet in front of themselves in front of the fog. We were here, said Tinker Bell. Bad men chased us. I remember, said Peter. Remember what? Said Wendy. Tink and I were in this park with your mother. I flew her out of Lord Astor's house when Umbra was after her. Nearly got us killed, Tinker Bell. It was a scary night. We escaped through the park, and that was the night I met your dad. We hid in his room. Really? His room? I'd rather not talk about it. They hid me under the bed, fumed Tinker Bell. What did she say? She said she'd rather not talk about it either, said Peter. They walked some more in silence, passed by the looming shape of Kensington Palace, its lighted windows barely visible off to the right. They were approaching from the back a row of grand homes on a grand street called Kensington Palace Gardens. Wendy pointed to a particularly large house on the right. There it is, she said. I know, said Peter. He would never forget that house. They started trotting toward it, energized by thoughts of warmth and food. Suddenly, Tinker Bell made a low sound. Peter grabbed Wendy's arm. Wait, he whispered. What is it? She whispered back. Men, he said. Wendy looked at the house. I don't see anybody. Of course you don't, said Tinker Bell. Peter led Wendy into a small group of trees. What do we do? Whispered Wendy. I'll have a look. You and Tinker Bell stay here. I'm not staying with her. Yes, you are, whispered Peter. If you go with me, they'll see your glow. Hide me in your shirt. No, they still might see you. Said Tinker Bell, this being the closest she ever came to saying, I guess you're right. I'll be right back, whispered Peter, but before Wendy could say anything more, he launched himself straight up, his body brushing against the tree branches. And in a moment, he was 100 feet in the air, hidden by the fog. Flying felt good after all the walking. When he figured he was close to the house, he descended slowly until he could see that he was over the large back lawn. He first studied the service entrance at the back of the mansion, which had an electric light glowing over the door. He saw nobody near it. Upstairs from the entrance and to the right was a large window revealing a well-lit room. Inside, Peter saw two children, one small and one medium, and a stout man with a red face and white hair. As Peter watched, a large, red-faced woman entered the room and said something to the children. Despite the tension of the moment, Peter smiled as he recognized Mrs. Bumbrake. He was about to swoop forward for a better look when he heard a cough almost directly below him. He froze, then slowly leaned forward, peering into the darkness. That's when he saw the bobby. Peter's eyes swept the lawn, but he saw no other men, and slowly, silently, he flew straight up into the fog. This time, the bobby was easier to spot. He was across the street, using the shadow of a large tree to keep out what little light was cast by the street lamp. Parents turned and headed back toward the park. It took him a few minutes flying through the fog to locate the stand of trees where he left Wendy and Tink. Well, whispered Wendy. 2 policemen are watching the house, one in front and one in back. Did you see anybody inside the house? Mrs. Bumbrake. 2 boys, one little and maybe one 7 or 8. Michael and John, those are my brothers. And an older man, sort of heavy, with white hair. That's Uncle Neville. Did you see my father? He's tall and handsome. Nope, nobody else, said Peter, annoyed at himself for resenting Wendy's description of her father. Maybe he was in another room, said Wendy. Maybe, said Peter. Well, whoever's in there, we need to get them out. We do? Why? 'Cause she's crazy, said Tinker Bell. Because the policemen are here, and that means that they're in danger, especially if Von Schatten finds out we're in London. We need to get everyone out of that house so we can all get someplace safe, and then we can figure out what to do next. Someplace safe, said Peter. Where's that? I don't know, admitted Wendy. She's just full of good ideas, said Tinker Bell. That's the end of that chapter. So remember, the reason that Peter does not see George is not that he is in another room. You have to think back to where George is. If you need a hint, think about the chapter Ice Coffin, and that will jog your memory. Okay, chapter 43 is called No Worse Fate, and this will be our last chapter for today. Not too long, not too short. Holding some papers and sweating despite the chill in the air, a chill he felt when Baron von Schatten was near, Simon Revell hesitated at the door to the king's bedchamber in Buckingham Palace. He raised a hand and rapped twice on the door. "Enter." Von Schatten's moaning voice sounded as always as if it came from somewhere far away. Revell stepped inside. Except for the light coming through the open doorway, the bedchamber was dark. Von Schatten and the king occupied facing chairs in the middle of the room. The king sat utterly still, seemingly unaware of Revell's entrance. Von Schatten turned his head slowly until his dark glasses faced Revell. "What is it?" "I apologize," said Revell. "I know your orders were that you were not to be disturbed, but I felt that this instance—" "What is it?" snarled Von Schatten in a voice that chilled Revell's blood. "Chief Superintendent Blake, he just sent a man here with a police report." "Concerning?" "A few hours ago, 2 officers were called to Victoria Dock to meet a ship and take custody of 2 stowaways." "Why would that interest me?" "They were children, a boy and a girl." "The world is full of children," said Von Schatten. "The boy escaped by flying." Von Schatten's head snapped toward Revell. "Flying? The police are certain?" "Not exactly. The boy jumped off the gangway, followed by the girl, and it was dark. Neither child was seen again. The bobbies took the small boat, searched the harbor, but they didn't find anything." "Maybe the children drowned." "Maybe, but witnesses, including one of the police officers, said they saw something flying away from the ship." "A bird?" "Oh, it was much bigger than a bird. The story actually caused quite a bit of stir in London." "What are the names of these children?" "Well, we don't know. The ship's captain questioned them, but they told him nothing." "How did they get aboard the ship?" "Nobody knows that either." "They just appeared on a ship out in the ocean?" "Yeah." For a few moments, Von Schatten sat silent. Then in a voice so low Revell could barely hear it, he said, "He's come back." "But how do you know? After all those years on the island..." "The darling girl must have gotten word to him." "The girl who disappeared?" "Yes, we should have taken her when we took her parents." He thought for a moment. "How many men does Blake have watching the Astor House?" "2, sir, front and back, round the clock." "Tell him to send 10 more of his best men now. They must surround the house, but they must not be seen. Let the boy and the girl think it's safe. Let them go inside where the boy can't fly. Then take them. Do you understand?" "Yes, Baron." "Wait. Where is the skeleton?" In the underground. He's been asking when he may, interview the prisoners." "Not yet. I still need them alive. Tell him I would appreciate his help in apprehending the boy and the girl." "Are you sure?" "Yes, he has skills that can be useful in this situation. But tell him I want the boy alive. Make it very clear, the boy is mine." "And the girl?" "He can do what he wants with the girl. Now go." "Yes, Baron," said Revell, and he backed out of the room and closed the door, leaving Von Schatten once again alone with the king, who had not moved a muscle. Revell hurried down the long palace hallway to carry out Von Schatten's orders. Revell was not one to feel concern for others, but he couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the 2 children. He could not imagine no worse fate than to fall into the disfigured hands of the skeleton, unless it was to become the prey of Von Schatten. So this is where our authors are at their best. They've spent a long time building up, the skeleton and his powers, and we obviously know what Von Schatten is capable of. So what they're doing is they're kind of laying the foundation for what's going to be an exciting scene. Peter and Wendy need to get inside the house, but of course Von Schatten wants to let them get in first and then trap them inside the house, followed up with the skeleton stepping in. So it should be some exciting chapters ahead. That's it for today's read aloud.